I'm Jono, and in this video, we're going to flex a beat loop. Now, what I mean by that is that we're going to take a MIDI region that I've programmed using Drum Machine Designer, and then we're going to use flex time, which is an audio processing technique, to just wonk this groove out a little bit and make it our own. Let's hear the MIDI region that's playing back at the moment, and then we'll see how to achieve that effect. Okay, so I'm using this kit called Jazz Vanguard, and what I want to do is to use flex time, as I say, an audio processing technique, to just allow me to pull these beats around. Now, firstly, why am I doing that? If I want to change the groove of a loop, why wouldn't I just open up the MIDI, double click on it, and come and find the individual notes that I'm using and change their position? Well, I could absolutely do that. But what I would do if I did that was to basically keep all of the hits sounding exactly as they do now and simply change their groove. What I actually want to do is to introduce some unpredictability into aspects of the way that these beats are going to play back. And one particular flex algorithm is going to allow me to achieve that effect. So what I need to do is to turn this groove into audio. So I'm going to close down the editor, and then what I'm going to do is to control click this region, and what I want to do is to bounce it in place. Now, I can see that that's right up at the top of the list, but that's only because I've used this process recently. I use it all the time, in fact. What I need to do if I don't have that at the top of the list is to come down to bounce and join, and I'll find bounce in places here. So when I select this option, what Logic is going to do is to say, okay, well, what do I actually want to do when I create this audio file? Firstly, what do I want to call it? And you can see that by default, it will just take the region name and put BIP, bounce in place on the end. It's going to put it on a new track, which is fine because I don't have an audio track set up within my project. It's then asking me what I want to do with the original MIDI. Do I want to leave it alone so that it's still playing back? Do I want to mute it, which I do, or do I want to delete it? That always feels like quite a dangerous option. What if this doesn't go well? The last thing I want to do is to throw away the MIDI region that has created the audio file I'm about to create. So I wouldn't go for that option if I were you. I'm going to mute it so it's there for me to unmute if I need it again. What I want to do is to include the audio tail in the file, which means that if there's any audio that lasts after the end of bar 4, the end of that region, it's going to be included in the capture. And I also want to make sure that that tail, if there is one, is also included in the region, which is going to be created at this point too. Now, there isn't any volume or pan automation, but you can see that that option is on as well. And I don't want to normalize the file. I'm going to just turn that off altogether. So when I press OK, what's going to happen is that Logic's going to sprint through and create an audio file for me, which should sound absolutely the same as the original MIDI. Okay, and it does. But what I want to do is to use Logic's flex modes to turn this groove into something which is just a little bit wonkier. And to do that, what I need to do is to turn flex mode on. Now I can see that it actually is on. If it's not on directly for you, all you need to do is to press the flex mode button here, and there it is. And what we then have is an opportunity to choose an algorithm, kind of like an analysis type, if you like, which is going to allow me to, or allow Logic to, go through and analyze this file and basically create what we call transient markers, individual places where individual hits are detected so that they can be moved around and wonked out, if you like. Now, the one that I in particular want to use in order to create this variation, which allows me to get away from the kind of MIDI precise placement of each of these beats, is called speed, and it's down here. Now, the best way to think about the speed algorithm is to almost imagine that what I've got here is a loop which is playing back on a reel-to-reel tape machine. If I change the speed, not only would the speed sort of increase, but the pitch of each individual hit would speed up as well. It would go up in pitch. And similarly, anything that I slowed down would get lower in pitch. So effectively, as I pull beats around, some will get lower as they get longer, and some will get a little bit higher as they get faster. And this might just introduce a little bit of unpredictability, which I think might be interesting for this particular groove. So I'm going to select this algorithm, and you can see straight away that what Logic's done is to create those transient markers that I mentioned. All of these little dotted lines are places where Logic has detected an individual hit, and then I'm in a position to move those around. Now, one of the advantages of flex time is it also means that I can now quantize this audio, and that's actually where I'm going to start. effectively all of those transient markers can move in order to change the quantize feel of this audio. And I'm going to start by selecting a quantize value of 1/16 swing C. Now the swing quantizers in Logic take the second of two notes, the second of two 16th notes in this case, because I've selected a 16th quantize value, and it moves it late. So effectively the first one stays where it is and the second one moves late, and as a result we get this kind of swing feel. And by doing that, all of those second 16th notes, so literally the one that's here and then the one that's here and here and here on these individual lines, will effectively be pushed back late, introducing swing. But because we're using the speed algorithm, effectively it means that the first one is going to be a little bit longer and slower, and the second one's going to be a little bit shorter and higher. Let's see what that sounds like. And now the pitched element that's inherent in that groove, this jazz vanguard beat that I've created, has just got this little bit of tuning variation as we go from a sort of slow, low, flat version to something which is a little bit sharper as it moves across those transient markers. Now that's great, and I like that. I think that's working really nicely. But what I can also do with flex editing is that I'm in a position to take these individual moments, these transients, and I can move them around to further change the feel of this groove. And I'm going to do a little bit of that just to slightly pull things around and make things feel a little bit more like they're my own. So what I'm going to do firstly is to take this first 16th note, which is already a little bit late because I've quantized it, and I'm just going to push it a little bit further late. You can see that as I move this transient marker, effectively what I'm doing is moving it up in the timeline, so effectively it's just going to get a little bit later. So we get a little bit more kind of extra kind of wonk on those grooves. I don't want to go crazy and create a totally out of kilter loop. This is just about moving a few parts around and just creating something which feels a little bit more like my own. So I'm just going to go through a few more spaces and find individual hits that I want to move. I can even move a couple a tiny bit up the timeline to make them a little bit early. So effectively we're pulling the timing around just both early and late, getting away from a fixed quantize to something which is just shuffling in and out of time a bit more. I've only looked at bar 2 for now, so let's just hear that bar by itself. And you can hear what's happening with this kick now that it's been sort of pulled in time. We can even sort of try and create something that's a little bit more like a triplet here if I push that one late. Let's see what that sounds like. Now, every once in a while, Logic needs to recalculate, which is why the audio is playing back. And of course, if I create some steps that I don't like, I can just use Command and Z to undo them and put things back where they were. So what we can do using a combination of bounce in place to create an audio file, and then switching to the speed flex time algorithm, is that we can ask Logic to detect all of the individual transient hits of our beat loop. And having done that, we can firstly quantize it, but what we can also do is just to pull things around, both pushing them late along the timeline and putting them early to basically inject our own wonky groove into this kind of basic pattern.